Today is Wednesday, April 29th, and I'm speaking with Franco Micucci. Franco, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you, Carie, for the opportunity to talk about this. Thank you.
Franco, could you tell us where you are now and how the recent the recent events surrounding the pandemic have changed the structure of your life and your work?
Sure. I'm in Caracas, Venezuela, where I'm an architect. I actually share my living space with my working space because actually this house, the environment in which I am, this actual place that I got almost 10, 12 years ago when I decided to somehow join my professional practice and my life in a way, in a one structure in which I divided both units. So I have my own personal residence as well as my office. So in a way, this is not as unusual for me because I spend a lot of time here. I also teach at Universidad Simon Bolivar, where I have to go almost every single day. But in a way, what's happened with me is that I have to somehow put together these three segments of my life, my personal life, my professional experience or practice, as well as my academic performance as a professor as well, in one space. So I'm somehow isolated, with my partner and my two dogs, but also I have the opportunity to get together with people somehow. I also miss the fact that people come over to my house for several reasons during the day. So I use this space pretty much 24 hours a day. So this is for me a regular condition in a way. I spend a lot of time here, and this is something that has represented a major change in my quality of life. I do have my dogs and the garden, so I will spend a lot of time outside. So I'm sort of a privileged person in this condition in a way. I cannot go to university for several reasons. I do teach at Universidad Simón Bolívar, which is a public university in Venezuela, almost 50 years old university with the architecture program as well. It is a university that has had major impact during the last 20 years because of the political, economic, and social crisis of the country. This institution that somehow replicated the model of technical universities such as MIT in Boston, in Cambridge, and some other universities, pretty much a technological university with a lot of engineers and careers that were actually designed for the industrial future of a country like Venezuela that, during the current time has proved to have a major crisis. So universities in a way has gone through a process of deterioration and destruction, severe destruction in a way because of the political attack to independent thinking and opposition in the country. So in a way, we have to develop a strong sense of resilience in a place like Venezuela where there's no electricity most of the time in many, many cities of the country, lack of water, for instance, problems with transportation as well. So in a way, our students and our faculty has been trained themselves for the last probably 10, 12 years to survive under conditions that are pretty much extreme. And even as a professional, we do that the same. I mean, it's probably a place in which you have to reinvent yourself constantly as a person, as a professional, as an academic, as a faculty, or as a student. So in a way, this has become a new phase of our own crisis, given the fact that, for instance, at this moment in Venezuela, there's no gas at all in all cities. So there's no way to get yourself to another place except for public transportation, which is still working. So in a way, quarantine has been a restriction that is almost mandatory, but at the same time, it's voluntary because we don't trust probably our sanitary system in the country as well. So in a way, the numbers that we had in Venezuela are not that large as in some other places because the country itself has been isolated for, as I said before, political, economic, and social reasons. So there are no many trips of people coming to the country. In fact, this is a country that has sent out people from the country. We have almost 5 to 6 million Venezuelans living outside the country, which is also a problem because the issue of migration has sent people to countries like Colombia, Ecuador, Peru, Chile, and even Argentina, and probably Europe and the US as well. So we have a lot of people outside the country, and some people are actually coming back to the country because of the critical conditions of their life in places like Colombia, in which they almost live on the streets, and they're coming back to the country through the borders, working or by public transportation in any way. So we don't have a clear picture of what the crisis is going to be like in a place like Venezuela. From the academic point of view, as I said before, the issue of resilience for us has been going on for time. We had to teach at least for one period of 12 weeks without electricity in our school of architecture at the University of Simon Bolivar. So students had to preserve, batteries on their computers. Professors have to move out their classes to different buildings. We even have to teach outside and do pin-ups on open space since we have this wonderful light condition in the country. So we have to reinvent ourselves all the time. This, in a way, it also has become an opportunity for students to somehow organize their own time, ideas as well, to put ideas in writing way, not only depending on verbal capacities to defend your own projects. So in a way, students and faculty have been using technology as far as we have internet, which is not something we guarantee here all the time. So in fact, we have to begin doing surveys with students about the capacity to take classes online in our city. Some people had to move out from the city to another city since they come from different provinces of the country. So we have to make sure that students were in capacity to get online and get classes, have classes with the professors in a way. So we have to define a new strategy in order to keep the university going on. And also we were lucky in the sense that we were almost at the end of a period when the quarantine began in Caracas. So we already had like a period of 10 or 12 weeks with contact with students and faculty. So it was actually only like the end of the trimester that we have to go through the quarantine. The question now is, are we able to begin again in the university doing with these conditions that we have right now?
Hearing you, Franco, is humbling because when looking at this crisis, maybe from the global north, and many have described it as a crisis, when I hear you describe your situation, the latest health challenges with the pandemic are really just one more layer atop of many, many, many political, social upheavals that have been going on in Caracas. So I'm curious if you have any kind of tangible examples of how you, as an architect, practicing architect, and an educator, have developed projects that allow you to still practice within an uncertain world. I mean, maybe you could share one or two.
Sure. Actually, we had to reinvent ourselves as a professional many years ago. The amount of work in Venezuela has gone down in an important manner. There's no public investment at all. There's very little private investment anyway. But we reinvented ourselves. Like right now, we're working on 10 communities, very poor communities in Caracas, doing projects with communities directly, communities that are very dense, that are somehow on critical conditions because of the quality of the infrastructure they have, the lack of water and services in places like this. So we keep in touch with these communities, with community leaders to understand what the situation is right now. Because we're actually doing projects with them for the public space of the community. It's actually a participatory process in which they began working with us and some other professional teams that are developing projects in communities about the public space condition, which is a critical thing. When you enter a barrio, as we call it in Venezuela, which is a slum or a spontaneous settlement, in a way, they understand their house in a different scale. I mean, the barrio is their house in a way. Once they cross the entryway or the gateway of the community, they already feel at home because it's very difficult for them to stay indoors. I mean, their houses are quite small. They live, in important conditions of density. So the public space serves pretty much for everything: recreational purposes, services, trading, transportation, mobility. So in a way, the condition of quarantine for these communities is quite different from like a middle and upper class neighborhood in a way in Venezuela. So we try to keep the projects going on, even though they are not priority for them at this point, but we want to keep the relationship going on since we expect at some point to continue the project to be developed in a way, because it's actually depending on their capacities to create opportunities in their own communities. We try to develop projects in which there's also an economic advantage for the community. We work with the community themselves. let's say, people with skills on masonry or ironwork or carpentry in a way, in order to develop a strategy in which they are responsible for the construction of their own urban environment. And we also deal with the issue of health and safety in these communities by providing tools, how to actually deal with the kids, how do you actually enclose certain portions of the community in order to preserve the social component, so you know your neighbors, so you can actually get in agreement with them about who enters the area of the community and who doesn't enter there. It's not only the issue of safety, but it's also the issue of security in a way, which is critical in areas where the notion of crime is being present all the time. Caracas is quite a dangerous city. In fact, COVID-19 is almost ridiculous in terms of the numbers of deaf people that we have in a place like Caracas that could get up to 18,000 people dead a year, which is an incredible number. And some of these places are quite dangerous as well. So we have to somehow use the same strategy to deal with issues of health, but as well as safety in these communities. And it's part actually a process of exchanging opinions and visions of their lives as well.
Actually, I think your work in what you describe as the informal settlements of Caracas is a good segue, perhaps, to the second question of the interview, which has to do with, and again, it's relatively early, but what, if any, impact you feel the pandemic will have on the world of architecture or perhaps the future design of cities?
I think I will link my comment before with this question in a way, because many neighborhoods in a place like Caracas and many other cities in the world do have to learn a lot from these communities, in which the sense of social organization, physical construction of their own urban environment has actually taught us much more than we actually have provided them with knowledge, in the sense that we have to learn about how, like a middle-class neighborhood has to somehow reinforce their own conditions, living conditions, in order to get people together to organize themselves with a crisis that is already systematic in a place like Venezuela for the provision of goods, let's say, conditions of water, electricity, internet, communications, health, safety. So in a way, this idea of the polycentric city that Leo Creer talked about many years ago, for us has become almost a permanent literature in our understanding of the city, in which we're actually thinking of the city as a collection of small towns and not so much as a large metropolitan area. So in a way, the preservation of the condition of neighborhoods and community, in my opinion, has become very important under the COVID crisis elsewhere, not in Caracas probably, because we've been training ourselves under circumstances that are somehow even harder than the COVID quarantine itself. So I will say that this notion of reinforcing centralities in the city, pedestrian connections within the city, the use of bicycles as a tool that is not an eccentricity, it's almost a necessity in many Venezuelan cities these days, has proved that different ways to live in places that were actually depending or relying on the oil richness of the country. So we were supposed to have cars for everyone in a country like Venezuela. And maybe the end of the oil era in the world is actually closer to us as well. And maybe we have to reinvent ourselves, not only in terms of social and political issues, but also in the economy of the country. So when we see the capacity of these poor communities to provide themselves with incomes by providing the rest of the city with the knowledge and capacities that are important in order to keep the economy going on, you understand the opportunities that we have to somehow face the economic crisis that in the future are going to happen everywhere. And I think maybe we have to look at that as opportunity, that not so much as a problem. And I think doing work that maybe 10 or 15 years ago, we were not probably spending so much time because we're actually doing projects in 7 other areas of the city, has become an opportunity for us to understand, what are the opportunities for 50% of the areas of cities like Caracas, Bogota, Lima, or Mexico City that are somehow probably crucial areas, but also places in which there's so much to be done in a way that at some point you realize, that we have to spend so much time doing projects in some other areas of the city that are important as well. For me, the city is a unit. I mean, I don't see the city as a segregated issue, and I understand the city as a whole. So I have no problem moving myself from a context to another, or from one kind of problem to a different approach. Working with institutions, with communities, for me, is the same in a way. And I think we have to train ourselves and even our students. And that's probably one of the crises that we have with this issue here, is that students have to be in touch with their own community and the environment of the city in order to understand the real purpose of architecture for the future, in a way.
Yeah. Well, Franco, I think listening to your perspective is an important voice in this conversation. I think you bring our attention to the question of the informal settlements and not just the possible solutions that might need to occur, but perhaps the lessons that we can learn from these resilient communities. And so I'm really grateful for the time that you've spent speaking with me today. And I wish you continued health and safety. And I look forward to the opportunity to see one another in the physical world very, very soon.
Thank you so much, and I hope you're well. And please take care of yourself and your family. Thank you again for the opportunity.
Thank you. Thank you, Franco.